I have something called the ideal graveyard. Basically what it is all the business ideals that I didn't finish over the years. But I have not stopped trying to come up with ideals, and you must keep trying until you figure it out. And that's basically what I plan to do.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Shabazz here with the Startup Basement in part 2 of building the software, building the startup, building the business. What I'm going to be breaking down here is basically how to go about starting a project, whether you're starting a business, whether you're creating a software project, whatever you're doing. Basically, the way I do it is like this. Whenever I'm trying to build a business, even from the past, what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of ideals in your head, racing, lots of ideals. You're going to have the ideal that you want to build, and then you're going to be thinking about all the stuff you got to do to actually build it. And that could be, I'm going to be straightforward with you, straight up overwhelming. So the way to defend against that is to organize yourself. And so what I call this first step before you get started on any project, whether you're building software, you're building a company, you're building a business, whatever it may be, is you thrash up front. Now, what does it mean to thrash? Thrash means you just work out stuff. You bang out the ideal. So there's all this stuff in your head. At the beginning, before you get started on the initial research phase of your ideal, to develop your ideal, what I want you to do is dump all the information out of your mind onto a piece of paper, right? And so I did that. I thrashed up front, right, for about an hour, and I organized everything in order of what I actually have to do in order. So let me show you what I came up with. And if you want to use this same framework, you can get, I'll put it in the links in the description. I'm going to walk you through each step. So for instance, what you're going to do at the beginning is market research. Then you're going to document all of your findings once you do the market research into a business model canvas. And what that is basically it takes all of the major elements of any business, whether it's software, whether it's a startup, whether it's a company, whether it's a service. Ultimately, you're going to have a customer, you're going to have a niche, you're going to have a problem, you're going to have a solution, you're going to have a money-making model, right? That's a business model, all that stuff put together. And it puts it in a nice, neat canvas, a one-pager. And that's really what you want, to really condense down what you're making. So after we do all of our market research, we're going to put in a business canvas. Once we get in the business canvas, we're going to do some more research, because now that we understand our business model, we want to understand what is the major risks involved in the business model. So you're going to identify the risk as part of your plan, and then I'll tell you about listing all the project unknowns toward the end. So that's what I did. Before I got started, I was like, man, I have all these ideals. I mean, I have a specific ideal in mind when I'm starting. So I'm assuming if you're watching this video, you're like me, you have a specific ideal in mind before you actually get started. But here's the catch. You might find out that ideal turns out to be faulty, right? So let's break it down. Here's what I did. What you're going to do is essentially sit in front of a white piece of screen on a paper and write out all of the stuff you need to do in the initial phase. And then later in the video, I'll show you how to do the next step. So one thing you don't want to do is plan out the entire project from start to finish, from ideal to launching it, to growing it, to marketing. That's too much upfront thinking. You're going to just think out the first initial piece of the project, all the steps you need to take, and then stop. And once you get all the answers to that, you can start planning out the next phase of the project, and you're going to do everything in chunks systematically. So start off with, what is your ideal? And under this section, you're going to concisely state your ideal on a piece of paper. So realistically, you're going to open up a Google Docs, you're going to organize it properly, and you're going to state out your ideal. I'll show you that in the next video, what my ideal state out. Next, you're going to list out all your assumptions. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, I have this ideal, and understand that your ideal is something new that's not in the market, which means it's not proven. Since it's not proven, then there's some assumptions you're making about why your ideal would be valuable, needed, desired, or would work. Write out those assumptions. And the reason I want you to write out those assumptions, like the top 3 assumptions you're making about your ideal. I think customers are ready to buy bananas from this market because of XYZ. I think that I can make a lot of money selling bananas to restaurants because of XYZ. You're making some type of bet, some type of assumption. And by the time we're done with all our market research, I want you to look at that assumption and say, did my market research, me actually researching the market, contradict my assumption? Even if it does, that doesn't mean you need to drop your assumption, but you do want to be aware that you are making an assumption. Don't just be sold that you have ideal and you feel in your gut's going to work. You're making some very specific assumptions. So when you do research, if that research contradicts your assumptions or show that the assumption you're making is not even the most important problem in the market, then you may want to consider changing what problem you want to solve, right? So you're going to write out your ideal, just concisely state your ideal, and you're going to list your assumptions. Next, what you're going to do is you're going to research the industry in which your ideal is involved in. For instance, I'm probably going to create some type of product for the individual investor financial market, right? For people who buy stocks on Robinhood, right? So that's the financial industry. So I want you to go on YouTube and I want you to go on Google, and I want you to start just reading articles and doing research. So I'm going to show you that later in this series, how to do that. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to start researching. But before I do all that stuff, like I'm showing you here, I wrote out all the major things I need to do. Now, once I thrashed, I mean, I sat there for 2 or 3 days getting this list together, organizing my thoughts of what I need to do. So when it's time to actually do it, I don't have to think out all this stuff anymore. I already organized it and put it in order where it makes sense to me. All I have to do is go down the list and do the steps. And that's why it's so important to thrash up front. It's going to save you a lot of time. It's going to allow you to have a clear vision of what you're doing, and it's going to make your life way easier. So on the research phase, what you're going to do is you're going to answer these questions. What are the biggest challenges in your target industry? So for instance, I'm doing for individual investors, like people who buy Robinhood, specifically millennials, right? And I'm looking for a problem to solve in the industry. So I'm going to go on YouTube and Google, and I'm going to do a whole bunch of research, read articles, read dissertations, and I'll show you how to do that later. And then when I identify the 1 or 2 biggest issues currently facing the industry, I want to write those down, right? And then I want to understand why those challenges exist. So I don't want to just say, hey, the biggest industry in the individual investor market is lack of quality research, right? Why is there a lack of quality research? Then I want to start researching on Google and other research sites why that is the case. I want to understand the problem. It's very important that before you select a problem to solve, you understand why it exists. What are the implications? What are all the things involved in it? Because that'll let you make the decision on how to solve it properly, how to get to the core of it and really create value for your customer and create a market for you, right? So that's what you're gonna do next, right? Next step, after I look at all the top problems in that industry, right? I started off with my initial ideal. Now I have to make a decision. Is my initial ideal more important than the biggest problems in the industry? And do I want to solve the biggest problems in the industry, or do I want to stick to my ideal, right? Or was one of my ideals one of the big problems in the industry, which is even better, right? So now it's time to select a problem. You went and did the research and you came up with all these problems, let's say, for instance, in my deal, in the individual investor space, right? They don't have access to enough information. Individual investors don't know how to sift through all the data that's available. There's no place to socialize with other people who hold the same stocks as them, right? Once you look at all the major problems in that industry, you need to select one. You need to select a problem that you're going to focus on, right? So I want you to write out what problem you're going to focus on out of the ones that you researched, after researching the industry. And then I want you to state who specifically has that problem, right? Get specific. Are you going to target the entire market, or you're looking for, let's say in my case, I'm going to target the millennial market, people who use applications like WebGoogle, applications like Robinhood, who tend to be younger people, right? So I want to really narrow down my target segment of that specific problem that I want to solve. I want you to write it out, right? Who specifically has that problem? Because now that's going to have implications on how you want to do your solution, how you're going to do your marketing, and what are going to be your features and offering that targets that particular niche of customer, right? Then I want you to justify why you selected that niche, and just write a really small one line. And the reason I want you to do that, I want you to understand that is your reasoning good for selecting to choose to go after that niche or to solve that specific problem in compared to all the 3 other problems. And I give you an example of a justification. What if the other 2 problems in the financial industry were big problems that required millions of dollars of capital to solve the problem? And then the 3rd option was you selecting creating a social platform for everyday investors can talk on, was more practical for where you're at, right? That's a good justification, but it may not be the perfect justification right? So at least write out why you selected that problem out of the other problems you could have selected, just to make sure that your thinking is not faulty. And then lastly, of course, we already discussed this, restate why the problem that you selected exists, and make sure you research and understand clearly why that problem exists, all the elements in the market that came together to allow that specific problem in the market to exist. And so that's your research, right? Now, once you understand the problem, the next thing you're going to do is move on to identifying the solution, right? You got this problem that you want to solve in the industry. Now you have to come up with your solution to how to solve it, right? And I'm going to tell you later in this how to actually do that in a systematic way, but I'm just walking you through the initial framework that you should be writing for yourself before you start doing anything. Before you do any research, before you start doing anything, you need to write out all the major steps you need to take in the first half of developing your ideal, right? So I wrote it out for you. You can always copy it out of the links in the description, but here's how it goes. So we're going to identify the solution, but before you identify your solution for the problem that you want to solve, there's probably somebody out there already solving the problem. If there's not, then you can skip this step, but usually there's somebody solving it. It may not be exactly how you want to solve it, but they are doing a piece of the solving. So it's your job to go research the alternative people who are already out there solving your problem. For instance, if I want to create a platform for individual investors to socialize, there are probably platforms that already exist, like Wall Street Bets, like other forums like Benzinga, where they allow you to chat with other investors, right? So it's your job to go look at what they're offering and what their unique value proposition is, and think about, do you want to compete directly with them? Do you have a better ideal? Do you have a niche or a pivot, right? So when you go research and find the top 3 people or solutions that are solving your niche target problem that you currently selected, right? And you want to know who they are, and you want to get real familiar with how they're solving their problem, right? And that's going to give you a whole bunch of ideas about how you want to approach your problem. And it's going to give you a whole bunch of ideas of what's realistic. Maybe your initial assumptions are really bad. Maybe your initial problem you're selecting is not the real problem. You're going to learn all that by doing that research. So go research how customers are currently solving their problem, the people that you selected, right? Then you also want to go research how would you solve the problem, right? Now you're going to start looking at what they're doing and start to refine what you want to do. Hey, they allow people to socialize on forums, but I want to allow them to actually talk on video where they can get a fully immersive experience. And here's why I think mine is better, right? And then lastly, you're going to say, why is your solution better? I want you to write a 1-sentence statement that says specifically why the way you solve their problem is better than the solutions that currently exist. And I want you to do this all for you are justifying what you're doing and not just saying, hey, I'm going to do this because I decided that this is my ideal, right? So once you get all that on paper, what we're going to do is document all of those findings into a simple 1-sheet business plan. It's called a business model canvas. And so what it allows you to do is to put your entire business model, all the major sections from marketing to your problem, to your solution, to your customer, to how you make money, to your unique value proposition. It takes all that market research that you made, all those things you wrote down, and you're going to chug it into your business model canvas. And that's kind of your 1-page business model. If you ever want to show somebody, hey, I'm working on this new project, do you want to help? You can show them your business model canvas, and it's going to sum up all of that market research to condense perfectly targeted words that tell you exactly what you're trying to achieve. That's why we're going to do all this research to build that business model canvas. Okay, boom, you got your business model canvas. You know exactly who your target customer is. You know exactly what the problem you want to solve. You know exactly what solution you want to solve. You know exactly if this is going to be a free product. You know exactly if you're going to try to make money off of it, and you have it all on a 1-page business plan, right? It's called a business model canvas. At that point, now you want to start working on implementing the actual solution. How am I going to actually build this solution? But before you do that, you want to think about your business holistically, right? So you want to actually identify the riskiest part of your plan, right? So this is something I'm going to break down for you that's a great approach when you're trying to deal with software projects or when you're trying to build businesses. Think about this. Whenever you start a new business, there's a whole bunch of assumptions you're making about how the industry works, how customers are going to react to your new solution. These are all guesses. And usually if you're creating a new business or a new software project or a new project in general, there's a whole bunch of things you don't know that you need to know. And so what we're going to do is think about what are the most riskiest assumptions you're making about your business. Like your assumption is customers actually have this problem. That may be a big assumption. You may want to do some research to prove that they have the problem that you think they have. You might be making a big assumption that the market is changing and people are moving away from a certain direction. You need to actually go do the research and prove that people are moving away from that direction, right? That could be a giant risk because you could build an entire business based on thinking customers are going to be over here when actuality they're not going over here, they're actually still going over there, right? So that's a risk. And lastly, and this is like the most important part of the project, and I'm going to talk more about this later in the videos, is you need to list out all your unknowns about your ideal, about your business, because what this does is tell you exactly what you need to spend your time on. So there's a whole bunch of stuff you do not know. I'll give you an example. Let's say I was going to build a software platform for individual investors where they can jump on Zoom calls. Well, if I'm not a software developer, there's a whole bunch of stuff I don't know. What type of software do I have to make? What type of features does it have to have? What type of database that it needs to use? What type of developer I need to, what type of software developers do I need who could actually build this? There's a whole bunch of stuff you do not know. And as you go through this process, you're going to start making a whole bunch of things that are unknown, known. And once you know all the core stuff about your project from start to finish, whether you're a developer or not, from hey, I have this ideal. Hey, I think these customers are going to need this problem. Hey, I need to develop software. I'm not a developer. I need to hire a developer. I need to know the requirements. All this stuff you do not know. You're going to systematically list out all the things that you do not know that are majorly important to the project being successful. And then you're going to systematically go find out the answers to those. And once you find out all the answers to all the things you listed that you don't know, you're ready and informed to build your business, because at that point you truly understand your software project. So a lot of people try to build businesses, especially software, with all these unknowns just floating around in their head, and it's better to get them on a piece of paper and systematically target them and break them down. So anyways, that's what I wanted to share with you guys. In the next video, I'm going to actually show myself going through this process, developing my ideal, because as you know, in this blog, you're going to actually follow me along as I try to actually build a software project. So I hope that all this stuff made sense. Till next time, my friends.
Continue.